being here today. So we are going to talk about Alabama Heritage Magazine, and I'm going to ask everyone to raise your hand if you know what I'm even talking about. So if you have not seen our magazine, I actually have brought copies, so when you leave you can take a sample copy with you to read, and if you've already read it, then please share it with somebody because we would love for you to do that. So I'm the director for Alabama Heritage Magazine, and I have with me, I am greatly thrilled about this because I have two editors of the magazine. The first one is Suzanne Wolfe, who started the magazine in 1986, and then Susan Reynolds, who is our current editor. So it's really wonderful to have both of them here today and to share their perspectives of the magazine and how things have gone, how they started, how they're going now, and then what kind of things we're looking for in the future. The magazine is co-published by UAB, and the Alabama Department of Archives and History. So it's a great opportunity for us to work with different institutions across the state. We even work with Auburn University, so forgive us, but we love them there. So we have a lot of different people who we work with throughout the state. And we also have people who are international writers, people across the country who write for us. We actually don't do the writing here in Tuscaloosa. We'll do some things, but we do all the editing here and we do the design work, and then it's printed in Montgomery, but we actually solicit articles. So anybody who's interested in writing something, or if there's a topic that you may be interested in reading about, then you can always contact us. And we go to different conferences and things like that to find out who's working on what projects and to find out more about these young scholars who are out there exploring new avenues that we haven't touched yet. So our magazine's been around for more than 35 years and it's been great. We have a loyal readership, people who have had the magazine since issue number 1. And they call us and say, you know, I'm missing issue number 132. Do you happen to have an extra copy? It's like, yes, I do. And so they're thrilled to be able to keep the entire set. It's kind of like what we did when we were younger and had the Reader's Digest. Remember, everybody kept, I think I still have all the Reader's Digest, you know, that I inherited from my mom. So Alabama Heritage has turned into one of those kind of trusted sources that people know that we're going to provide, you know, informative, entertaining stories about this great state and all the things that, you know, good, bad, and ugly. So it can be pretty exciting. And I've asked Suzanne and Susan if they would share with you a couple of the stories that have meant a difference to our state, because some of them have been pretty impactful. And that makes you feel good when you know that the little thing you're doing in the corner of the University of Alabama campus can make a huge difference in your community. And so they're going to share a couple of those stories with you today. But first, I thought I would actually just ask Suzanne if she would kind of give us a little brief rundown as to how the magazine started and whose idea it was, and maybe she can tell you a little bit about this house. Does anybody recognize the Kilgore house in this picture? It used to be a Victorian home on campus, and I'll go ahead and say it so Suzanne and Susan won't have to, but it's no longer with us. It led a great life, and it was originally part of the Bryce Properties, but unfortunately, you know, after being auctioned off even for $1, nobody wanted to buy it and move it, and so it got torn down. So this was the original location where Suzanne started. So if you want to tell us how the magazine, I'll let you hold this so that people on Zoom can hear us. Yes.
Well, in 1995, Bill Bernard,
A little closer.
Bill Bernard, who was chairman of the history department, some of you may remember him, invited me to lunch, and he had about 15 magazines with him. They were state magazines or regional magazines or city magazines. He was thinking of starting a Center for the Study of Southern History on campus, similar to the one at Ole Miss. And he wanted this magazine to be part of it. Bill and I had worked together before on a very lengthy project for President Joe M. Thomas. I'm sure you all remember Dr. Thomas. lovely man. Every 10 years, the university has to go up for reaccreditation. And Bill and I were part of the team that wrote all the documents that we had to give to the Southern Association. And it took about 6 months, so we got to know each other quite well. And anyway, Joab was very pleased with the results, and he kind of wanted to give us a present. And Bill said, you know, I've always wanted this book, this magazine on Southern history and culture. And, yes?
The people on Zoom can't hear you.
I've always wanted to, Bill said, I've always wanted to do this, and I think we can do it, and I think we should talk Suzanne into doing it, and she will. I'll be glad to help her. And Joab was a very kind man and gave us some money and gave me room in this house. And I started, but when I started, I had an electric typewriter. This is, you know, before the internet, before computers were on campus. I had a telephone. I didn't have a copy machine. I had to walk down 2 blocks to get something copied. I had the right to use half of a secretary who was downstairs. And I used carbon paper. Has anybody in here ever used carbon paper? Do you remember how horrible that was? Anyway, I gave myself 6 months to hire a staff, a small staff, to find some writers, researchers. My husband was an English professor, so I knew a lot of people on campus, so I started with people I knew. And had to develop a marketing plan. I'm kind of shaky about that. But within 6 months, I had a small staff. I was very lucky to hire a guy named Guy Hubbs. If any of you remember Guy, Guy's a wonderful Southern historian and a great researcher. And this is important because, you know, we could not check things on the internet. We never even heard of the internet. You went to the library over and over again. So we lived up there with Joyce Lamont. You may remember about Joyce, lovely librarian. And within 6 months, we produced our first issue. I also started to do something that I kept on doing for the rest of my career there. I realized when you sit in a university, you're in the middle of so many smart people. Why not ask them a question? I didn't know how to do marketing, so I went to see Morris Mayer and the Department of Marketing at the business school. And Morris said, why don't you take 2 of my very best students and we'll give them some academic credit for working for you. And you don't have to give them any money. That was good because I didn't have any. But it all worked out well. And so I got some really smart graduate students working for me. And they researched mailing lists, they researched brochures. We did a very professional job with Morris overseeing everything. So it worked out well. And we had maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people in the first issues. Just for this one brochure we mailed out. Another thing, I discovered in the Kilgore house something called a Jacquard. Does anybody know what a Jacquard is? Jaqard. It was a dedicated word processor. It was about the size of this table, but it was solid. It took 4 men to move it from one side of the room to the other. It had discs about this size. And I had never seen anything like it. And they had a textbook, a manual about this size. I took a week and a half to learn how to use that machine. I thought, I am wasting my time. But no, that saved my life. And I used that Jacquard for 5 or 6 years. And I don't know when computers came to campus, but that was another huge transition. At any rate, you also asked me one time how the Alabama Historical Association felt about our coming in, and I can tell you they were not pleased. I'm glad you all have mended paths with them, but they sort of thought Alabama history was theirs, but I was of the impression that nobody owns history.
And I want to add to that too, because the Alabama Historical Association, if you guys are familiar with that group, it's a great group to be a member of. They have 2 meetings a year. And they realized that their publication is a quarterly journal that's more academic in nature. And our magazine is written for the general public. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. So it's a lot less, we might have similar stories, and we definitely have a crossover in people who write for us. But if you've ever heard of the Alabama Historical Association's journal, the Alabama Review, then you'll know that one's a little bit more of an academic. And once they realize that, no, we're gonna be a little bit more casual and laid back, we're still gonna be just as factual. And Susan can, tell you as well how we have to fact check everything and make sure it's all accurate. But, because we don't really write anything that's fiction. It's all accurate history. And so that was, I think, the turning point, is once they realized that we're not really competing with them, then they were a lot more pleased with having us to help share the stories.
I wanted Alabama Heritage to be something like an Alabama New Yorker, you don't read the New Yorker, you expect to find an error, and you're not gonna find one in Alabama Heritage. Maybe not. Very hard to find.
I'm trying to switch slides, if you give me just 1 second. Now it's not switching, the arrow or the. There we go. Okay, thank you. Technology. So as Suzanne was saying, we had very little technology at the very beginning of the publication, and of course now everything is done via computers, and we save things to the cloud, and so there's not that much more, we could do our work on our cell phones if we have to. It wouldn't be easy, but we can. So maybe Susan, you can tell us a little bit more about, some of the other changes and how things are going for the magazine now, where we're located, and what kind of different people that we work with, because I know that Suzanne had talked about she had lots of graduate students as well to start the publication.
Yeah, so I'm Susan Reynolds, and I'm the current editor of the magazine, and I started as a student worker in 2008 when I was working on my PhD here in the English department. So I've heard about Suzanne my entire time I've been here, and have finally been so grateful to spend some time with you. You've been out of state and everything, so it's been really nice. I actually started working in the Kilgore House. I also was very upset when the Kilgore House was torn down. I wrote most of my dissertation there and spent many long nights in the haunted house that is Kilgore. Yeah, Linda knows. So I loved it there, and it made me very sad. So when I first started, I actually have magazine work in my background. I worked at Southern Living magazine for years before I came back to school and started on my graduate work. And a friend of mine who was working as a student worker at Alabama Heritage said, "Hey, we need another student worker. Can you come and help? I think you'd be good." And at the time I was like, "Oh, not again. I don't know if I want to do this again." But it was so different. I mean, the content's so different, and it changes so much over time that it's been a lot of fun. And while I've been there, the magazine has really morphed in terms of just the basic structure of how we run things, just by necessity. We no longer have graduate students really working for us. We do have an internship program that's a dual internship program with the UA Press, but their time is limited between the two of us, so it's a little bit different. So now what we do, whereas Suzanne, when you started, you did everything, basically. I mean, marketing, business, everything. Now everything is pretty much divided between Rebecca and I. I handle everything print and editorial, and she handles everything business. But we're a great team, because, well, I hope, and we've been working together for a long time now. And we attend conferences together, and the Alabama history community is pretty small at the end of the day. But you know who to go to get certain articles, right? If I want an article on Native American history, I know who to go to for that, who will tell it well and tell it the right way. And as we were talking about, we do have a lot of crossover between the Alabama Review, the authors they use, and then the authors we use. And it's just amazing because those authors that do write for both of us, you know, they know how to change audience, right? It's a very different thing to write an article for a review than it is to write for us. We have a public audience, public history audience. And just one thing I really come to appreciate over the years in terms of how this magazine is done is, as Suzanne was talking about, it's just the amount of people involved. You get a magazine in your mailbox and you see this listing at the front, right? It says editor, director, all this stuff. And yes, we do a huge amount of work, but if you think about all the people that go into this, not just the writers, but our students, librarians, archivists, photography experts, designers. I mean, there are just probably at least per issue 100 people that I'm working with at different institutions, different libraries sometimes across the country, sometimes across the world, trying to get materials from them. And we were kind of joking about errors in the magazine. Sometimes that does happen. It's never intentional. Usually what I've also come to realize, because I have an English background, not a history background, and so I've learned a lot through this process, but history is very fluid in how it changes, right? Because you learn new things, a new discovery is made, and that can change everything that you've learned, right? So even some of our articles from the past could be rewritten in a different way today just because of new discoveries that have been made, new documents that have been found. I mean, there's all kinds of things that go into it. So it's an ongoing process, and we're never going to run out of stories to tell, in other words. So that's what's most exciting to me. And another thing that we're really getting into, and I'll let Rebecca kind of go into this more, of course, is we've gone from a time when we didn't have computers and the internet to now when a lot of our world is digital, right? So we're kind of moving in that direction too, although we still have the print magazine, don't worry. But I'll let Rebecca talk about that.
Yeah, because a lot of people have said, you know, they just want the print magazine, and we understand that, but then there's other people who want an article or two, whether they're doing research or if it's just a topic that they're interested in. And so we're trying to make everything digitized so that way people can have a copy of articles that they can order online instead of having the print magazine. And plus then it's instantaneous instead of having us ship it to you. We have a big digital presence. I mean, we're on social media, and I guess Facebook is our biggest draw. People like to follow us on Facebook. So we have more than 21,000 Facebook subscribers, but we also have 10,000 emails that we send out, you know, constantly with updates and things like that. But one of the biggest things that we discovered is how you can post something on social media and it goes viral. So we know what our followers like to see. And like with the most recent football game, we had already done a story on Coach Bryant when he was turning it would have been his 100th birthday. And so we did this great article on him that Winston Groom had written, and he interviewed a lot of Coach Bryant's players. And so it was a really nice piece that Winston did before he passed away. And so we promoted that again this past weekend, and a lot of people just loved it. They just, you know, jumped on that. But besides promoting things that we've already written about, we also work with the Encyclopedia of Alabama, and that's kind of it's an online resource, and it's mainly for students and teachers, but it's a vetted Wikipedia. So if you want to know anything about Alabama, go to Encyclopedia of Alabama first. Don't go to Wikipedia because it's not necessarily as accurate. So we will post some information, you know, to share that they have. And one of these that's on the screen was the Kate Duncan School. It's Daughters of the American Revolution School, and it's in North Alabama. And it was just an interesting story about how people in that community built that school. And they didn't just build it by sending their children there, they physically built it. I mean, you can kind of tell, it's hard to see from this photo, but the stone masonry and everything that's done in that compound, and families went and actually laid stone and helped to build this big school. Well, we posted this and it went viral. You can see there on the very bottom it shows there was 250 comments, over 1,000 people shared it, and you start reading the people's comments. It's like, oh, my family went there, my mom was a teacher, and so it's engaging, and we love that about that. And so we try really hard to stay engaged with the people who follow us on social media. But when I went to Susan, I said, honey, you gotta look at this, because I could not believe how many people were so interested in this story. We decided to find somebody to write an article about it for the magazine, and so that turned out to be this cover story here. And so the cover story turned out great too, because then we had people call us at the office and say, I think that's me in that photo. Or I think that teacher must be my aunt. And so we had a lot of response from that. And it's great when you can have those types of opportunities where something that you do, little that you would know, that you put something on Facebook and it goes viral. So I'm like those trend-setting kids. We went viral, and I was so happy about that. But that's sometimes how we find our content, is when you guys have conversations with us online and you engage with us, so then we know exactly what you're interested in, and that's how we can find new stories as well. So a digital presence is really big for us, and we'll be continuing to go that direction as well, but definitely the print magazine will stay here as long as it's supported by readers like you guys. But what I'd like to do now is kind of get Suzanne and Susan both to talk a little bit about some of the stories. Like I said at the beginning, there's some of the stories that we have produced that we feel like made a difference, but then also we know they've made a difference because we've seen action, we've seen things happen. And so we're gonna start with Suzanne. She's got a couple of stories that she can kind of give you the background on. This first one is from our first issue. If you look, that's the cover of the first issue number 1. And this story is about James Reese Europe. And so I'll let Suzanne tell you a little bit about him and why this feature was impactful.
Well, as I told you, can you hear me now? I had to rely on my friends for my first issues because I didn't know who else I could trust. And one of my best friends was Reed Badger. He was a professor in American Studies, and he had a real interest in jazz and early American music. And he had written an article about James Reese Europe. He was a black man. He was born in Mobile in 1881. And his family went north, as many black families did, to find opportunities. And he joined he was quite an excellent musician, even as a child. And he joined the American Army for World War I, which was, of course, a segregated army. And so they gave him a black band. Well, it was the first time they'd ever had a whole band. And they sent them to Europe, and the French just adored him. I mean, they'd never heard music like this. It was really the first time that a large number of white people got to hear black music. And he became quite famous and came home to New York to a ticker tape parade. He went on to, not very long, I'm sorry to say, because the man was murdered later on, but he was very well known in America. And Reed Badger, on the basis of his church, got an article, wrote a book for Oxford University Press, than which you cannot do much better. And he also, people at Carnegie Hall recreated a 1912 concert that James Reese Europe and his band had done. And Reed gave a lecture at Carnegie Hall, and he has since sold the rights to a Hollywood producer, and it might become a movie one day. We don't know. Unfortunately, James Reese Europe was murdered by a member of his band after a concert, a mentally disturbed man, and he died in like 38. So it was a very sad ending to a quite remarkable career. But anyway, I thought there was a long way to go for a small boy from Alabama.
And if you go onto IMDb, which is the Internet Movie Database, you can see that I think they're actually calling it Hellfighters.
Yeah.
So they call it in production, which means that that movie could be in production for the next 20 years and it may or may never make it to the screen. But that's kind of cool to actually have an article that we did that could be turned into a film. So the next one I wanted to ask Suzanne about is from issue number 7. Let me skip to 7 and then come back.
Okay.
Issue number 7, we also had a wonderful article about the Aliceville POW camp. And I just wanted to say something very quickly about this one in particular. One of the gentlemen who was a POW in this camp, his son lives in Germany and he's still a current subscriber to our magazine. And so he's been very supportive of our magazine, and he keeps in touch, and he tells us all about, you know, Aliceville and different things, and it's been a really good opportunity to keep that relationship going. So this is a story that keeps giving, and it came out in 1988, and so to have his son still engaged with us, I think that's fantastic.
It is, I didn't know that. Well, this story came to me, a friend of mine, Anna Jacob's father, had come to America in the 1930s. He'd been born in Germany. He was Jewish, and he could sense the anti-Semitic mood of Germany. He came to America. He became a physician. He joined the American Army, and they sent him to Aliceville to tend the German prisoners. But the German prisoners did not know he was German. They did not know he understood everything they said. And they certainly couldn't tell that he spoke English with a German accent. They couldn't get that. So he was extremely helpful in keeping the Americans well aware of what was going on in the camp. But the camp was a remarkable group of people. This was Reynolds' army from North Africa. These prisoners of war created their own symphony. They built their own instruments. They had theater, they did Shakespeare theater, they did costumes themselves. They had pre-med classes they gave to each other. They were extraordinary group of people. Anyway, some of them got to know a lot of the people of Aliceville. They drew pictures of them. We have pictures in here that the prisoners did of the Aliceville residents. It was a fairly nice relationship, and the Germans were very glad that they'd been captured by the Americans. Sure. These camps were largely in the South because the American government did not want to pay to heat all the camps in the North. So they were in the South and the Southwest. Dr. Fleck was able to give us a lot of interesting things, but also that library in Aliceville had a lot of scrapbooks that nobody had ever really used before. So we did a lot of research on our own, and then I had to go look around for someone to write it because we didn't have time for that. I found this great graduate student in English, Randy Wall, sent him down there for about 2 months, and he did a fabulous article which the people of Aliceville used to create a museum to the Alice. Is it still there?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so good at yes. I didn't know. I mean, they used the article to drive their museum, and they got in touch, as she says, with a lot of the German prisoners of war. You know, people in Germany weren't interested in reading about American prison, better times in America, but we were, and so they got a lot of information from the Germans. Still going, yes.
Matter of fact, because a month or 2 ago, they did a reenactment of the POWs getting off the train.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's a very big deal.
It's a big deal.
It really is.
I'm so glad. Aliceville just sort of changed its vision of itself after this article, you know? They felt
You can
good.
thank Suzanne for that.
Well, I mean, it just started with my friend's father, you know? That's how things start.
Yes, they did.
Yeah. Anyway.
Another article that Suzanne wanted to talk about is a little closer to home here, and it's from issue number 32 in 1994, when we started talking about Bryce Hospital and what are we gonna do with it?
With what?
Bryce Hospital.
Bryce Hospital, yeah. Well, another friend of mine, Robert Malone, wonderful writer, who is an art history professor at UA, retired now. But Robert is a fabulous researcher. And Robert wrote an article on mental health and moral architecture. And he explained the moral architecture premise. You're probably aware that prior to about the mid-1850s, most people in the world thought mentally ill people did not feel hot or cold. They were often chained in the basement. They were poorly treated. And then people like Dorothea Dix came along, and then others in England, and tried to be much more humane in the treatment of patients. And moral architecture developed in America primarily. And Bryce has this main building with these long side buildings. Well, the most seriously mentally ill people lived out here on the edge. And Dr. Bryce and his family lived in the main building. And the better you got to keep moving in further until you were supposedly living right there and could go home. And the gardens were part of the solace that they needed, and the building itself and the theory of mental health treatment coincided. Robert was extremely instrumental in saving that building. It is not a building you would think the University of Alabama would save after about cut down the Kilgore House. But they did. I'm really proud of the institution for saving it. It is a model for maybe 40 other buildings in America, who are all, of course, now outdated. Bryce couldn't serve mentally ill people any longer because the rooms were too small. Everything was wrong for a 20th century view of how you do this. But they're going to make wonderful places for art students and music students to have studios. It's going to find a new life. But I really believe Robert's article set the groundwork for that. And I'm real proud of it.
And the university is continuing to work with Bryce Hospital. Obviously, it's not open yet. And Susan can tell us a little bit more about where we are with it today, because we ran another article and we've had a couple of tours with the vice president of construction. And one tour that we were on with him, he said, well, I'm supposed to be vice president of construction, but I'm turning into a historian, because he's learning more and more about the history of the building, but then also, like Bob Gamble's specialty, the history of the architecture and what's important and what's to save and what needs to be renewed, as opposed to just completely torn down and start over. So it was kind of nice to hear the university have that little historic perspective on it. But Susan wanted to talk just briefly about the article that we had in the fall of 2017 when we had yet another tour of the building.
Yeah, so most of us are fascinated by that building. It's just an amazing building itself, and I'm sure many of you know, before it was being restored, it was in pretty bad condition. And UA, decided to buy the property and restore it, refurbish it and all of that. And when they were trying to raise their initial funds, we were invested in that story too. So we went inside and kind of took pictures of how it was then, but tried to present it in a really beautiful way, which our designer did. He took the photographs and also, did the layout and everything. So this article was really important in helping raise money for that building and get a lot of the funding available to help redo it. We went in during this photo shoot. It was kind of terrifying, I'm not gonna lie. We went in before they had actually made it a pretty safe space to walk around in. We were up on the 3rd floor at times with huge gaps in the floor where you could see down literally to the basement. It was kind of scary walking around up there, but fascinating at the same time just to see everything. And when we went to the first meeting we were having here on UA about this article, I can't remember the man's name now, but he was the one who made the decision to take down the Kilgore house. And the first thing he said to me as we were sitting there was, "I'm sorry." I'm sorry. So I said, "Look, we're not here to discuss that. Don't get me started." Just no, it's fine. But this was a really, really special article, and it did help a lot in getting Bryce to where it is now. And if you haven't driven by there to look at it, I encourage you to do so because it really has come a long way.
Another one that Susan wanted to talk about was Augusta Evans Wilson, and you don't realize it, but you're in the company of greatness because Susan has become the expert in Augusta Evans Williams. She's actually written about her and presented on her throughout the regions. So too many times, yes. But if you want to tell us a little bit more about her, Susan.
This is one of those articles, and I'm doing this purely for egotistical reasons, just because I feel like I did this and I'm tired of talking about her, but at the same time it brought so much. I was working on my dissertation at the time. I wrote this article when I was a student, and I just wanted a distraction because my dissertation was on 19th century British lit, and I needed a break. So I asked the editor at that time, Donna Baker, I said, "Is there anything I can write about?" She said, "I don't know, look around, see if you find anything interesting." And I knew I wanted to do a woman author. So I found her, and she was, Augusta Evans Wilson is a woman who was just behind in sales Mark Twain and Harriet Beecher Stowe. She was extremely popular during her time as a writer, and she wrote a book called St. Elmo, which was extremely popular. A lot of people said that Margaret Mitchell based Gone with the Wind, the relationship in there between Red and Scarlet, on this pairing in that book. I don't know if I believe that, but it's okay. But it is a kind of a fascinating book, and you talk about something going viral at the time in the 1860s. It was written right after the Civil War. It sort of infiltrated American culture. There were towns named St. Elmo. People named their daughters Edna Earl. Actually, Rebecca's mother's name Edna Earl. That was the main character in the book. So it just, towns, hotels, everything were named after this character. So I was pretty fascinated by her. And I just thought, well, this would be a good distraction, so I wrote this article, not thinking anything about it. Well, right after it came out, it just sort of exploded. I guess it was at the right place, right time. And Robert Clem, who does a lot of documentaries and things for PBS, contacted me, and he was doing a documentary and wanted to do it on Augusta Evans Wilson, so I got to be a talking head in his documentary. And then he made this strange interpretive film of St. Elmo to go along with it, and that was fun. And then that turned into writing a chapter for the series. There's a series for each state in the South through the University of Georgia Press. There's North Carolina women, Alabama women, and they covered just various women that were important in the state. That led to that. Lots of talks, lots of speeches. So I never expected that to happen, but it did, and it was fun. So that's kind of the story behind that. And then also in that same issue, is that the next slide? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, so this was a big issue just in terms of articles that kind of went crazy. This article is very important to me personally. I didn't write it, of course, but it's Alabama's archaeological sites. And at the time, they were trying to pass a law in Alabama preventing people from looting specifically water sites, especially where Native Americans have maybe had villages or hunting along riverbeds, things like that. And people were going in and they would loot the site. And of course, if you're not a professional archaeologist, you can ruin the history of that site. And it was really important to me. I'm not an archaeologist or anything, but it just really bothers me when people do that. I understand the thrill of the hunt and the thrill of finding something, even if you see an arrowhead in the woods, right, or something, but when you take something or dig, you're disrupting the story of that place because you learn so much just from trash heaps even, right? So this article actually led to legislation being passed where it became illegal to, you know, loot a riverbed specifically and offshore type of archaeology. So that was really important to me.
Thank you, Susan. And one more that Susan had, and the description below it I notice is incorrect, but this one is called Awaiting Justice by Tom Reedy from North Alabama. If you want to tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, and I was still, when was it, 2012? I had just become a full-time employee at this point, so I didn't actually solicit this article, but I know Tom Reedy really well, and it was very important to Tom Reedy, who again is a historian up in North Alabama, to get the exoneration put through legislation for the Scottsboro boys. And it was still sort of on the fence whether or not that was going to happen. So we published Tom's article here about the Scottsboro boys, the story behind it, just basically a group of young black men who were accused of raping a white woman. Was it one or two? One. Most of them were put to death. And most of them were children. A lot of them were children. And of course, turns out, you know, none of them did that to her. And so this article actually led to the governor at the time going to Scottsboro at the Scottsboro Museum, what has become the Scottsboro Museum, and, you know, signing in the exoneration and the pardon for all of the Scottsboro boys posthumously. And then some of their family members were there, and that was really special. It was a great event. You know, it was really important and really special. So that's another one. That's probably one of the biggest.
And what we were told is that someone actually took this copy of the magazine and put it on the governor's desk and said, we need to do something about this. And so again, when you write something and it's that impactful and it goes to your legislatures or to your governor even, and then they read it and decide to take action, then you must be on the right track, must be doing right things. So talking about being on the right track and doing the right things, the last thing we really wanted to talk about real quickly before we have, I'm not sure when we're supposed to end, 5 minutes?
We've got another 30 minutes that will include Q&A.
Oh, okay, I thought we were done at 1, thank you. So I've been trying to rush us through, we'll have plenty of time. One of the other things real quickly though that we like to do is once a year, and Suzanne can tell you a little more about how this started, we publish the list of places in peril. And there's been a lot of places, and some here locally in Tuscaloosa. There's a house right down the street from me, and that Wood Manor that was, you know, saved after it was put on this list. But we have a list of these different homes and structures, businesses that are put on this list because if something doesn't happen to them, these historic sites are going to be demolished. And so I think it's really important that, you know, as one of our ongoing, enduring legacies is to bring these to light in hopes that somebody will do something about it and protect these beautiful resources throughout our state. So Suzanne, if you want to tell us a little bit about how you and I think Bob came up with the idea and where it went from there.
Well, I don't know if you realize that the Alabama Historical Commission keeps track of all of their historic properties in the state. I mean, they know the people that live in these houses, they know the history of these houses. They're not all houses, but they're structures. And they are the repository of all this information. Robert, I would say this, Alabama was not at the forefront of historic preservation, to say the least. Yeah, I mean, people in Charleston was doing Harry's historic preservation in the 1920s. This was the 1980s. There was not a peep going on here. So I said, Robert, you know, I've got this magazine, I've got a great photographer. We can do this. You got the information. Together we can do this. I was on the board of the National Trust Advisory Board for a long time, and I was also on the board of a little organization called Alabama Preservation Alliance in the state, but it was fledgling and it wasn't doing too well. And so Robert and I put this article together. It was him doing the writing and made most of the work. And we signed it, but it's really Alabama Heritage and Alabama Historical Commission that did it. I put the Alabama Preservation Alliance name on there because I thought it would help them get along, but they didn't get along for quite a while. And later they changed their name to the Alabama Trust or something. So I don't know, you'll have to figure out what happened with Alabama Trust.
Well, it's still going on. We still have the Places in Peril. There was a year there where we usually have about 10 properties that they will showcase, and there was a year or two where things were kind of iffy as to whether or not that program was going to last. And we maybe had 5 properties, but it's still going strong. It comes out now in our spring issue. It's actually the previous year's list because everyone submits a property to be included now in Places in Peril, and it's not decided on until December. So that's why even though it's this year to be the 2023 list, it will go in our 2024 spring issue. Talking about, funny stories and things, when we did a bicentennial book, that covered both the territorial bicentennial.
Funny you mention that, it's right on my job.
I don't like to talk about the bicentennial, that was a lot of work. But the other half was also the statehood bicentennial, and in there we had a lot of properties and things like historic properties around the state, and that led to discussions when Robin and I would discuss the book and everything. Robin McDonald is our designer, and he takes all the photos. We would talk about the book, and he'd start talking about Places in Peril. And I can't tell you how many stories he told when he's taking pictures of these properties that are in the magazine where he's fallen through a floor. He has, one time his car got kind of flipped over because it fell into a ditch. I mean, he goes through a lot to take the pictures for these Places in Peril because some of them are out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they can be, it can be a building in a downtown. They can also be, a house in the middle of nowhere that's all overgrown with ivy and probably snakes everywhere, and the fact that he went out there and took pictures like that is amazing.
Robert and I were in Gainesville once in a house, and the door was broken open, and we all were just going up slowly the stairs, and a huge owl came down the stairs, and we all fell down the stairs. It was really.
Robin will take you to the craziest places. I mean, he took me to a really scary place outside of Livingston one time, and I told him, never again, I'm not coming with you ever again. I don't even want to know who had been in this place and what was going on there, but it was frightening.
Well, one of the things our department loves to do is we go on field trips because we don't actually write the articles ourselves, but we want to know more than what's just on the paper that we read. So we do go on a lot of field trips together, and sometimes we'll bring our students with us, sometimes Robin will join us, sometimes Bob Gamble will join us as well. And we have a lot of times people who are hosting us, who are from the community, that can show us hidden gems like a cemetery that nobody would know about unless you cross through a cow pasture, which we had to do one time. Sarah Martin was our former marketing manager.
Ready to mention her?
And Sarah Martin was our former marketing manager, and she and I don't even know where we were going or why, but it was one of our trips, and we will often see abandoned places like what we see here in Places in Peril. And we're just drawn to them, or if it's a beautiful white church that's probably over 100 years old, we're drawn to that as well. So we'll pull over to the side of the road, park the car, get out our little cell phones and start taking pictures. And there was one time that we were trying to take something that there was like brush between us and a fence. And there was some, it was a big pasture with some cows and horses, and we were trying to take pictures. So I'm leaning over and taking it with my cell phone, and then I come back out and I turn and look at Sarah and I said, "Are you ready to go?" And her eyes got huge, her mouth dropped open, and she froze. She's like, "Rebecca, I don't know what to tell you." And I was like, "Honey, are you okay? Are you having a seizure? What's going on?" And she's like, "I don't know if I should tell you or if I should just take care of it." And I'm like, "Wait, what's happening here?" And there was a huge spider in my hair. And I had not known that I leaned into, because I was so focused on taking that little picture that I leaned into a shrub that had this big spider web. She said it was about that big around, and she immediately swatted it off of my head. And then she got on her cell phone to Google it to figure out what kind of spider the spider was. It was yellow and black. I think it was dangerous, but for me, any spider is dangerous. I don't know. But yeah, we risk our lives to tell stories for you guys. And
Rebecca and Sarah were the renegades of the group. I'm the rule follower. And there have been times when I have been sure that Sarah was going to get me arrested. And also Sarah's a big turkey hunter. So anytime we'd see a wild turkey in the road, she would slam on those brakes and we'd have to turn around and find the turkey.
Oh, yes. So we've had some interesting field trips. If there's any place that you guys ever want us to go visit, let us know, because we'd like to see all parts of the state, and we try to take all the back roads. We hardly ever get on the interstate unless we absolutely have to. The last thing that I wanted us to talk about, and I know Susan said this is a dirty word, bicentennial. The reason why it is because the bicentennial for the state of Alabama was 2019. It was also the bicentennial for the city of Tuscaloosa. We were all very heavily engaged in local and statewide activities, but we had the great idea of starting in 2016, and technically we planned the year before that. And so the bicentennial for you guys was 1 year. For us, or maybe one event, for us it was 3 years in the planning and different works, and that's because we created 2 special editions of the magazine, and one was talking about Alabama becoming a territory, and then the second one was Alabama becoming a state. And then we worked with the University of Georgia Press. Back then it was New South Books, but they've been acquired by University of Georgia Press. And we published a book. It's our first and only book, and it was a legacy for the state. We worked with the state tourism department and tried to get that produced for Lee Centel. That made him happy, and it's something that we still have on our shelves. And so it was a lot of fun to have a book that we could promote and put together. But it was definitely a lot of work, and and I applaud, Susan Reynolds for all that she had to go through for it, because
I'll take that.
yes, I'll buy you lunch. And so it was a lot of work, but it was definitely worth it, and it's being used by a lot of different people. I've noticed that, even the governor, she's been putting it in gift baskets when she has different dignitaries who come to visit her. She might have a copy of this book with her. We had John Merrill, who was Secretary of State at the time. He came by, we did a book signing. We did a few book signings, but he came by one of them and bought several copies of the book, and I know that he was giving those away as gifts as well. So it was really nice to see different people come and get copies of this book, and then not just have it on their shelf, but then actually use it. And so it's been a really good resource for different people. We're very, very proud of it. So will we ever do another book? Probably not while Susan and I are still around. We'll leave that to the next generation. We'll let the next generation decide. But that's really all that we had for the presentation, but we did want to leave some time for any questions that you guys might have. So if you just want to raise your hand, yes.
Wait just a minute, you need to be on the microphone. Can you take down the PowerPoint so we can see the Zoom people? And be sure to tell your name so the Zoomers can know.
My name's Jan Mercier. I have a question. Are you going to address the Clotilda?
We have.
You have?
Yes, we did an article on the Clotilda, and the actual archaeology and the science behind dating it and finding out, actually verifying that ship was the correct time period, where it was, that kind of thing. So yeah, we ended up doing that article. It was very exciting article.
And the man and woman who wrote that article are actually publishing, or just published a
Yes.
book with the University of Alabama Press on that.
And in fact, it will be
So-
one of our presentations.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things too that's great, being, sister organizations with the press, because then we can share authors, and if someone has a book that's being published, it might take them a year or two before it's gonna come out, but then they can write a great little, synopsis of it, or just take a segment of it and rewrite it and rework it for our magazine. So it was really nice to be able to work with them for that project before the book came out.
Thank you.
Jan.
Not me to do
I just want to say how lucky we are to have these creative people with us today, and to welcome Suzanne back to Tuscaloosa. I understand you went away, but you have returned, and that's great. And all the creativity that's gone into this and sharing with everything. And she stepped away from the camera, but Anna Jacobs, singer, is one of the people who's on Zoom behind your head,
No,
Suzanne.
yes.
That was the person who gave the information about her father at the Aliceville cancer.
Yes.
We're all family here together.
Yes.
Right? I wanted to ask a question before we take other questions. Do you have an online subscription, or do we just subscribe to the print?
Right now, you can subscribe to the print magazine, and the only thing that we have that you can buy virtually is the certain articles. You can buy those as a PDF, and one of the reasons why we don't have a digital magazine yet is because of permissions. And I'm gonna call on Suzanne for just a minute, because back in 1985, when they started the magazine, and we didn't have computers and we didn't have an internet or anything, it's not her fault, but we didn't have permissions. And I feel like sometimes Suzanne may have just called Fred and said, Fred, do you have that picture of that tractor I was talking about? And Fred would say, yeah, I do. I'll bring it to you. And he drops it off or puts it in the mail. Well, we give them credit in the magazine, but we really don't have a sheet of paper that says, you can use this and you can use it for a website or any other digital purposes. So that wasn't around until, a decade or so more later. And so we actually brought in a grad student, and he retroactively got permission for more than 5,000 images, because that's one of the things that's great about our publication, and you'll see a copy when I give you one at the end of the class today, is that we have a lot of photos, and that also sets us apart. So I love that we're kind of an Alabama New Yorker in terms of content, but we also, we're 4-color, we have great photographs that we use, and a lot of them we have permission to use digitally, and some of them we don't. Or if they want us to use it digitally, they want to charge us. And so as a nonprofit, it's really hard to justify using all of them. So we're working toward that. So that's a very long answer. So to let you know that yes and no. You can get a PDF of certain features that we have permissions for, but then the rest of them we're working toward trying to find a way to create a digital platform.
And I'm a subscriber to the New Yorker, as many of you all are, but I never feel that's interactive. You just have convinced me that we're in a conversation here, and that it's given an ownership feeling, hasn't it? Elizabeth Aversa is waving her hand in the air, and here she comes.
Yeah, I'm Elizabeth Aversa, as she said. My question has to do with the editorial piece and contributors. So you compare to the New Yorker, and there are regulars who write columns for them all the time, and then there are contributors. So how does this work for Alabama Heritage?
We also have regular, I call them, we do call them contributors, I guess, contributing editors who write certain departments for us, certain department pieces, like our Reading the Southern Past, which is our book review department, Nature Journals done by Professor Leary up in Stanford University. So we do have regulars that do it. I like to have my editorial calendar planned for about 2 years in advance if I can. And usually how I go about getting authors for the magazine is I go to a lot of conferences, a lot of events around the state of Alabama that are history related. I'm trying to solicit articles from younger scholars as well. I think that's really important to get them involved. So graduate students who are presenting papers at conferences, the Alabama Historical Association is a big place I go, but then also through the years, because I've been doing something for the magazine since 2008, I've met so many people now that you get to know so many people, and they come to me, and they say, hey, this person I know is working on this, let me get you in touch, and so it's a great little community. Does that answer your question, or?
No.
I'm sorry.
The question is, what if somebody sends you an unsolicited
That's fine
something?
too. I do take from quote
And
this
how
lunch
frequent
pile.
is that?
I used to get a lot of unsolicited material. That is becoming strangely enough, maybe it has to do with the pandemic, I don't know. You know, during the pandemic, the archives were closed. A lot of people couldn't get out to research things, libraries were closed. But I used to get, you know, several submissions a week. I still get them. I still get slush pile submissions, and I take a fair amount of them. In fact, most of them I will. I don't mind working with an author who's never even written something before. That doesn't bother me at all. And I have all levels of writers who are working for the magazine. Some are seasoned writers who are, you know, well published, and others have never written a thing before. And yeah, I'll take slush pile, I'll take anything, as long as it fits the bill.
And that's what makes her such a good person to work with, because she's a great editor. So she can
I
take.
taught a lot of freshman comp too, so I'm used to working with a lot of levels of writing, so it doesn't bother me.
She can make anyone sound good. And I would say probably a third of the articles that we have really should have her name on it instead, because you never know what they're gonna come in like. But we do get a lot of submissions like that.
Is there anybody online who wants to unmute and ask a question? Because we have another question here in the room. So, and I will just say in passing, I had introduced an Alabamian who lived out of state to the late great Mary Ward Brown. And I wanted to give some context, and I found out I could get the article that has a beautiful picture of Mary Ward Brown laughing. I never met Mary Ward Brown, sorry to say.
That was
but
a cover story for Alabama Heritage a couple of years ago, and it's a great photo. Yes.
And it gave a context for both of us.
I'm Linda Olivet, and so glad to have you all here today. Thank you so much. And Susan and I have known each other for a number of years in various ways, but I'm just so proud of what you both have done to establish this magazine and keep it going. I was wondering if on your website there might be a PDF file or something that would have an index of all the articles and what issue, and then can you go to just a single article on the website?
Okay, so it's kind of a multi-layered answer to that
Okay.
question. So we do have index files we're in the process of upgrading to a different website right now, so all this will probably look a little different soon. We used to print an index in the magazine. We moved that online because that takes up a lot of room, and it can get very overwhelming. And the problem was for years too, different people were doing the indexing, so it was never uniform, you know, as to what was going on. So we do have index files on the website. We also have just a search bar, so if you're looking for a particular article or you're looking for a particular subject, you can search that. There will be a buy link for buy the issue. If the PDF is available, does that show up too? Okay, so yeah, the PDF link, you can tell I don't do much with business. The PDF buy link will show up as well. You know, and so, but, you know, one thing that we do as well is if a group, like a history group, a local history group, knows that we've covered something and that article is maybe not available for sale, you know, we can work with that group to figure out something so that they can have that material. But yeah, the older articles, it's just hard to get them, sometimes all the permissions, especially if we used a really expensive photograph from Getty or the Getty archives, because they don't just charge you once for the digital permissions now, they charge you an ongoing fee. Every 6 months you have to renew it, and Getty them just can be thousands of dollars, so it's a mess.
So also, if you just want to call us.
Yeah, you can come.
I mean, we have another wonderful resource. Her name is Cindy Sanford, and she's been with us for about 23 years. And I love to say that if you call us, she picks up the phone. And so you speak to a human. You don't have to listen to an automated response saying, you know, please listen to all your options as they have recently changed. I mean, I've heard that every day this week, somebody I've had to call. And you can't get out of the loop, and you just keep hitting 0, hoping somebody will pick up, but they don't, because then you have to start all over again. But we don't have that automated system at our office. We actually have real humans, and with Cindy being there for so long too, is that she's real familiar, and she can go, oh yeah, we did this article, I remember, and she can visualize it, and she'll know, and she can find a way to look it up and get you that information. So always feel free to call us.
And also, if any of you have, things that you know about that you'd like to see an article about. Even if you don't know someone who could write that article, you can still tell me, and I can start putting the word out there, for that kind of thing.
Would you go over again what the subscription rate is and how often the periodical comes? Kate Chestnut?
For a 1-year subscription, it's $31.95 starting October 1st. We just recently went up on our rates. And we are quarterly, so we come out 4 times a year. And then we have original content that goes up on our website for free. So that's an added bonus to your subscription.
And beautiful, beautiful photographs. Okay. What's the phone number for Cindy?
205 348
I think I should say that.
7467. So that's 205-348-7467. And her name is Cindy Sanford, and she's from Northport, and she's fabulous. We love her. We just recently we have a Friends of the Alabama Heritage program that, we could go into more, but we won't. But it is basically our donations program. And so as a nonprofit, we are always asking for money. We're not going to ask you for money, but we would love for you to contribute if you'd like to. There's a big donate button on our website, alabamaheritage.com. But the last letter, I usually write a letter to our readers, and the last letter I wrote talked about Cindy. And I even put a picture, because you can do that now, instead of just doing a typewriter, you can actually include a picture. And I included a picture with Cindy and talked about how she gives you that personal quality service. And that's one of the things that our donations help pay for, is to make sure that we can still keep that personal level. And I just appreciate that with a small organization like ours.
Annette?
I'm Annette Carter. I recently discovered your magazine because somebody donated that much on a bookshelf of back issues, and they were selling them for a dime a piece.
That must have been the Friends of the Library, was that it? Yes. We've donated a few there, and every time we donate, they say, "Oh, thank you so much," because our customers love this magazine.
Every time I go, I get another big stack. And then when I finish reading them, I pass them on to a friend, and she reads them, and I don't know what she does with them after that. I have a tendency to read in the bathtub, and I dropped a book in, so I no longer read books in the bathtub. The magazines really provide me with, and I enjoyed it so much, and I wish I had taken Alabama history in high school, but I didn't.
Well, that's one thing, is that you're never too old to learn. But I mean, we're always, and we're still learning, because like Susan said, I mean, a lot of these stories that, you go back to issue number 1 that had the quilt on it that Suzanne was talking about, and a lot of those stories are still applicable. I mean, they still make sense, and it's not anything that you would change. The only thing that we might change, like Susan was saying, is that if some new research has come out, and that is like, oh, there's something new, there's a new discovery, or there's an element that we haven't found before, or we uncovered their diary, and so now we have more details. And so that's really the only time that you would change history. But otherwise, these stories, they're endearing, but then they're also enduring, and so they're gonna last forever. And so it's good that you guys are able to read some of the older articles and from the very beginning and pass that on to your friends. And if you love it that much, then you should subscribe to the magazine. It's alabamaheritage.com.
I just read recently about the school for the deaf and blind.
That was an
And I knew
amazing
nothing about.
The Alabama
Well,
Institute for Deaf and Blind.
And that was one of their residuals of going on a field trip, because Susan and our former editor, Donna Baker, went on a field trip to the Alabama school. And so it was really nice to see all of the things. When they came back, Susan was just
It was the most
amazed.
inspiring day I've ever had in my entire life.
And that turned into an article, because it's like, something, it's there, you might see the sign when you pass it on the highway, but then you don't really know what they do. But, Susan was saying that the compound is ginormous, and all the things that they do and the kids do there, it's just incredible work, and it's just beautiful. And so it was a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to write about them and to share that information so that we can all learn about what's in our own backyard, because sometimes we just don't even know.
Thank you so much for coming today. We're out of time. I want to encourage people to talk this up, especially when you meet people from outside the state. This is not hoop skirts and magnolias. This is real Alabama history, and warts and all, but
There is some
it
hoop
is our
skirts still.
heritage. Well,
But it's all
there
of
might
it.
have been a hoop
It's all
skirt
of
in
it.
it one day or another, but many people don't understand the nuanced history of our state. This is a beautiful way to do it. Thank you so much. Do you have?
Thank you, and I do have copies of the magazine that we can put by the door, so if there's anybody who would like to have a copy, just grab one on your way out. And thank you, we appreciate all of your attention and your great questions, thank you. Thank you, Ashley, for sitting on there.
Have that conversation. I would love it. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
There you go.
Oh, sure.